Hey, let me ask you a question. What do you believe moves the markets? Well, if you want to know what the objective truth is of what actually moves the markets, that's what I'm going to get into in today's video. If it's your first time seeing my face, my name is Shengeb. I am on a quest to learn market microstructure, starting out with Orderflow, and I'm taking the complex topics of Orderflow and simplifying it into simple lessons that we can all gain from. If that sounds pretty valuable, feel free to give me a follow. Now let's talk about what moves the markets. There are many theories on what moves the markets, so many that I can't even name them all. But I realize if we just strip all of that complexity and just look at the market for what it is, a marketplace, we can see that any asset you trade, whether it's NQ, ES, they have transactions, lots of transactions. And in order for a price to move from 25 to 26, somebody has to be willing to buy at 26 and somebody has to be willing to sell at 26. And order flow is how you see these transactions in real time. The best way to lay a good foundation of order flow is to start with the types of orders. Now, there are two types of orders with two sides to these orders. There's aggressive orders and then there's passive orders. But stick around a little longer because I promise you, by the end of this video, I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to show you an example that's going to illustrate the different types of orders so well that you'll have it internalized. You could explain it to a 5-year-old. Trust me. Now, getting back to the different types of orders. So aggressive orders are market orders. They're orders that are put in to buy or sell at the best available price level. The key word here is immediately. Another key characteristic of an aggressive order is that they're willing to cross the spread. And I want to show you an example to really illustrate this point. So I drew up a nice little bid and ask. This is also a dime as well too on your charting platform. So we have three price levels, 25.5, 25.75, and then 26.0. Now I want you to pay attention because bids are people who are willing to buy at this price level and ask are people who are willing to sell at that certain price level. Now, if you notice at 25.75, we have nobody willing to sell at 25.75. So keep in mind, there's limited liquidity for the sell side at 25.75, something we talked about in our last video. So an aggressive buyer has to cross the spread. They can only buy from the ask. So they have to be willing to cross the spread from price maybe being at 25.5 to getting filled at 26 flat. They are sacrificing that extra tick in spread just so they can get filled immediately. Now, one thing I really want to go over here that it was pretty exciting for me is the psychology behind aggressive orders. Anyone who puts an aggressive order values urgency and immediacy of fill rather than where they get filled at price. And to put this into an example, let's just think about ourselves here. Can you remember a time where you had physically put in a market order instead of a limit order? Ask yourself, why did you do that? You had a certain perspective on something that made you highly believe in the fact that you need to get filled immediately. That catching this move is more important than where you catch the move at. So when it comes to aggressive orders, by nature, they value urgency and immediacy over price. This was so powerful for me because it can start to form my questions. When you see a lot of aggressive orders at a certain price level or a certain area on the charts, you can start to ask, what are they seeing that's making them value urgency over the price that they're getting filled at? All right, so now the opposite to aggressive orders are passive orders, or I like to call them limit orders or liquidity providers. Now, passive orders are people who buy and sell at specific price levels or better, right? They're the people that sit on the dime, they sit on the book waiting to be filled. They place their orders in at certain levels waiting to be filled. These are the actual people who provide liquidity. These are the people who sit on the depth of market and provide orders to be filled so the markets can move. They're liquidity providers. When it comes to liquidity providers, they value price over urgency and immediacy, right? They value getting filled at a specific price level or better. Opposite to aggressive orders who value getting filled immediately, regardless of where they get filled on the price. So understanding the intent of passive orders, you can start to ask yourself questions like, why are there so many people that have limit orders at this specific level? What are they conveying here? Why are they so interested at this level precisely? You can start to ask questions and formulate theories just based off of that alone. So now it's time to get into the $1 million question. And as soon as I ask this question, I want you to pause and drop your response in the comment sections below and ask why, or tell me why as well too. Out of passive orders and aggressive orders, what order type you believe moves the markets? This is very interesting, right? Because passive orders provide liquidity, but without aggressive orders, price really goes nowhere. From my little time of reading up and understanding the basics of order flow, I've came to the conclusion that I believe that aggressive orders is what actually moves the markets. Somebody willing to sacrifice that spread in order to get filled is what moves the markets. Now remember, a little bit towards the beginning of the video, I said I was going to give you an example that really illustrates this perfectly. Now is that time. But first, let's define the two order types, passive orders and aggressive orders. And then let's define their two orders themselves, right? Aggressive buyers and aggressive sellers versus passive buyers and passive sellers. So now it's time to get into the example. We're going to use Zillow as a representation of a marketplace because if anything, it's a really good representation of the home market or housing market. So we got Fort Worth, Texas. All right. And over here on the right hand side, you can see that there are a bunch of offers for houses, people that are willing to sell their houses. Now, remember, there's different types. So let me get this on a black screen here. Hopefully I can edit this. There's aggressive orders and passive orders. And then within aggressive orders and passive orders, there's aggressive buyers, aggressive sellers, and then there's passive buyers and passive sellers. So aggressive sellers and aggressive buyers are liquidity takers. Passive buyers and passive sellers are liquidity providers. Now, in this case here, on the right-hand side where we have the list of available houses for sale, right? These people here are what we would call passive sellers. Why? Because one, they have put in an offer in the marketplace to sell their house. So they're selling, but they aren't necessarily just taking whatever offer a buyer may present. For example, if I came to this guy who's selling the house for $259, right, and said, hey, $250, and he's like, deal, that makes him an aggressive seller. But in this case, that's not what he's doing. What he's doing is he's putting his offer out there and you have to come to him, which makes him a passive seller. I just showed you what would make this passive seller an aggressive seller. Now, remember, a few minutes ago, we talked about the intent of these participants, right? A passive seller intent is price. He values price over urgency. But the moment a passive seller turns into an aggressive seller will be the moment where his intent, his priority changes from price to urgency. So let's say, for example, this guy who's selling or whoever's selling this house for $259 says, housing market's going to go down. I believe that in a few months, the house that right now may be worth $250 may be worth $200, which means that I need to sell this house as fast as possible. And you can see this too on here on Zillow. You can see how this person has an open house on Sunday, which is tomorrow. Why do they have an open house so quickly? Because they're trying to sell this house as fast as possible. Even though he may be a passive seller because he has his offer out there, he is also showing intent of being an aggressive seller as well. He's trying to get this house sold as fast as possible. So right now, it may be, in this person's mind, it may be a stalemate between prioritizing urgency versus prioritizing price. But like I said, what would make a passive seller into a aggressive seller is if someone came to him with an offer and instead of holding up his price of $259, he accepted whatever offer that they came to. He is making that urgency move because he needs to sell the house. So he's making that aggressive move to meet the buyer at where they're priced. Now, if he made that transaction, he turns to an aggressive seller and the buyer turns into a passive buyer. One thing that I want you to remember about these order types is they can never be an aggressive buyer and an aggressive seller on the same side. It's always either a passive buyer and aggressive seller or an aggressive seller and a passive buyer. So, for example, all of these listings here are passive sellers, right? Now, a passive buyer would be me. And I'm going to give an example of a passive buyer. If I click on this house, right? I see it's for $259. I go and I tour the place. I like the place. And I come in with an offer at $250. I am a passive buyer. I like the house, but I don't like it enough to where I'm willing to pay your price. So for me, my priority, number one, or actually my only priority, is price. So if the market was made up of just passive buyers and passive sellers, you're starting to realize how we wouldn't move at all, because he would stay at 259, I would stay at 250. Who's going to cross that gap? How is this house going to get sold? It would stay on the marketplace forever. That's where aggressive buyers and aggressive sellers or liquidity takers come in. If I'm an aggressive buyer here, I am looking at this house offer for 259 and I'm saying, I like it. Deal. I'm not willing to negotiate. I don't care about price, because my number one priority is closing a house as fast as possible. And I can have my reasons for this. I might be moving to an area and starting a job, and I don't want to stay in my hotel for too long. I might be just wanting a house because I believe that the housing market is going to go up and prices are only going to go up, right? I have my reasoning. And this goes to show, like, you can use the intent, right? Even tying this back, you can use the intent of understanding what is the underlying psychology in an aggressive order, and you can use it to formulate ideas. Why are there so many aggressive buyers at this support level? There is some information that they have that they believe that price is really going to shoot up and they need to get filled immediately. That tells you something. Now, whether they're right or wrong, hey, that depends on the market, right? But at the end of the day, you still understand why they're doing what they're doing. Now, I explained what an aggressive buyer is for this example, right? This person that's asking 259 is a passive seller. If I'm an aggressive buyer, I'm meeting him at 259. I explained what a passive buyer is him selling this house at 259 and me offering at 250. Now, in this case, remember, an aggressive seller is if this guy who was offering the house at 259, I came to him with my offer of 250. He accepted my offer at 250. That made him go from passive seller to aggressive seller. And you can see these things in the market. When you look at the depth of market, let's say there's a relatively big order of 44 on the book. He's at 50, price is at 42. Price goes down to 39. He pulls his offer from 50 to 45. That makes him aggressive. Even though he's still trying to get a good price, he is chasing price. He is trying to get filled. For him, that lever of balance between price and urgency is starting to shift. Right now, it may be 50-50, and there may be a point where he's going to say, hey, listen, I don't really care about price anymore. I'm more important, or my number one priority is getting filled. All right, so now let's get into practical application. Tools that you can use to visualize the concepts that we talked about today. Remember, today we talked about aggressive orders and passive orders. So let's talk about the tools. The first one is the depth of market. The depth of market does not show you aggressive orders. It shows you passive orders. Now, it is Saturday. I'm sorry. So you're not going to be able to really see the depth of market in live action. But on any trading platform, you can just look for your depth of market. Usually you gotta have level 2 data with it though. So with the depth of market, you can see all of the resting orders. For example, like we have this level at 480. There's 11 passive orders here. Let's say on average, there was one contract per level. And we see this level here at 480 with 11 contracts. We can start to formulate the question, well, why are there so many passive orders here? Why are they so interested in this price level rather than all of the other price levels? And if you remember the intent of passive orders, you remember they value price over urgency. So you can start to ask yourself questions like this. Okay, what does it show on the charts? Maybe at 480, there's a level of resistance or something, right? And you can take the time to look at it. Let's see here. 480 was all the way above here. So 480 was high of day. Essentially, was new high of days, right? So that's how you can kind of use the DOM to see passive orders. Now, I really want you to formulate your own ideas, really take the time to look into these things and build your own theories around it. But I just want to give you guys the framework so you guys can understand. Now, this only shows you passive orders. What about aggressive orders though? So aggressive orders, the best way I look at aggressive orders is via time in sales. So now markets is closed, but I'm going to use this historic bar replay to show you. So this is what a time in sales look like. It has all of the aggressive or executed orders. It shows you that. One thing about the depth of market is it can be prone to something called spoofing, We're going to talk about that later, don't worry. But basically what spoofing is manipulation. With time and sales, there is no spoofing. There is no manipulation because time and sales shows you the executed orders in the market. So you're able to see these executed orders pan out and you're able to kind of get a picture of what's kind of going on. Now, some of the times when you see it, it looks pretty overwhelming. How I kind of use it is I like to see clusters like this, green clusters multiplied by speed. I like to see a lot of green clusters come in pretty fast because that shows that there are a lot of aggressive buyers who are showing urgency on the tape via speed at a certain price level. That can start to give you, that can start to formulate ideas or questions around a certain specific price level. For example, we've seen an influx of orders at 406. Well, what was 406? Well, it was around that first standard deviation of VWAP. Right? So you can start to formulate all of these ideas, but time and sales is another big one. Now, before I show you the last practical application, these are just all things that I use. Feel free to take the time to research other tools and find tools that help you spot aggressive orders and passive orders better. Remember, all I'm giving is the foundation, which you can build your own framework upon. The next one that I use is Delta. Delta I use to see aggressive orders. Now with Delta, it helps me spot imbalances between aggressive buyers and aggressive sellers. It kind of paints the field for me to see who's winning between the two. There's also CVD. There's a lot of other tools you can use. You can take the time to research, but what I recommend is you find what works best for you. Now that we're at the outro of this video, you understand what aggressive orders is. You understand what passive orders are. They are the foundation of order flow, right? You got to understand these two things first in order to get into the more complex topics of it. I hope I did my best job of explaining it simply, as this was the best way that I can internalize the information as well. Thank you all for watching the video. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave it in the comment sections below. But until then, peace and love.